On Friday, the president signed an executive order invoking the Alien Enemies Act, but intentionally did not advertise it. On Saturday morning, word of the order leaked, officials said, prompting a mad scramble to get planes in the air. So at 2:31 Saturday, an immigration activist who tracks deportation flights posted on X that 2 highly unusual ICE flights were departing from Texas to El Salvador, which had agreed to accept Venezuelan gang members deported from the U.S. Hours later, during a court hearing filed by the ACLU, this Judge Bosenberg, federal judge, ordered a halt to the deportations and said that any flights needed to be turned around mid-air. This is something you need to make sure is complied with immediately, he told the Justice Department. This is according to the Washington Post. At that point, about 6:51 p.m., both flights were off the Yucatan Peninsula, according to Flight Pass posted on X. Now, just a refresher for people that may not know what the Alien Enemies Act is. It actually goes all the way back to John Adams, so it's pretty old. U.S. federal law passed in 1798 as a part of the Alien and Sedition Acts. Some from the history class may remember this. Officially titled An Act Respecting Alien Enemies. So the White House put up their justification for the use of this act. I'll share exactly straight from the White House here. Invocation of the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by Tren de Aragua. The justification is that you can basically say for people you're going to war with, so it grants the presidential broad authority to apprehend, restrain, and deport non-citizens or natives, citizens, or subjects of a foreign nation or government with which the United States is at war, or when a nation threatens or attempts an, quote, invasion or predatory incursion against a U.S. territory. Now, the United States sure believes that Tren de Aragua, which they have also by executive order denoted as an enemy of the state, a terrorist organization, has invaded the country. They brought up examples of what's going on in Denver, Colorado, with activity there. These are people with very clear tattoos and affiliation. Many have actually committed crimes on U.S. soil, so it seemed like a pretty no-brainer. We need to use this to go after them. For those curious on who was actually on this flight, we actually got some information from shout out Bill Malugan, does great work at Fox. Per a senior Trump admin official, there were 261 illegal aliens deported to El Salvador yesterday, 137 via the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, 101 were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, this is regular immigration proceedings, 21 were Salvadorian MS-13 gang members, and 2 were special cases for El Salvador. Bukele posted that the U.S. returned 2 MS-13 ringleaders to El Salvador. Some of the rap sheets for those involved include the following: kidnapping, sexual abuse of a child, robbery, aggravated assault on a police officer. So here we are. We're in this standoff where a judge basically said these guys got to come back. The United States, Marco Rubio said, no, they're not. They're going to El Salvador. And we're at a bit of a constitutional crisis is what some critics are painting this as.
Oh, another one. Right.
Josh, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, okay, so obviously this judge in particular does not think that the president of the United States has the authority under this Alien and Sedition Act to deport these people without any kind of due process rights, okay? Because they're enemy combatants. They don't get due process. That's just the way. That's why Trump invoked it. So this judge thought, well, you can't just do that. And that would be one thing. And so that would be a thing where you could say, from now on, no more flights you can't do this anymore. You have to make sure they go through this process before you depart them. But he's like, this judge is like, no. Even the planes that have already left, I want you to turn them around. And so this is the whole case of whether or not should one federal judge be able to put a temporary restraining order on all activity, and this is why we need judicial reform. I mean, it should be that what should have happened is he should have said, this is wrong, and we're going to tell the administration no longer to do this from this point forward. But it really should be like a federal circuit should be able to say that rather than just one judge. And look, I've been clear about this for years, if this is the game that we're playing, both sides are going to do it. And so, when a judge in Texas, during the Biden administration put the kibosh on horrible stuff, or one judge in Florida that put the kibosh on having to put masks on when you fly airlines, hey, I'm not against it, but I want reform and I want it to be long lasting. And I want it to be the case where an entire court would have to do it. In this case, he's like, no, not only are we going to argue this over in the courts, but I want you to immediately turn around and stop those planes, which the Trump administration's like, yeah, good luck with that. Because those planes are in international waters and you don't have jurisdiction over international waters. And so the planes did return, but only after they dropped off the thugs
Yeah.
Right.
Erica?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, I think, with the Alien Enemies Act, it was new to me because it was back from the Adams administration. But I think
The
that
first Adams
the
administration.
first Adams administration. Thank you for the clarification. That it went back so far, but I think the Trump administration ran on the understanding that we are under the Biden administration. We did face not only unregulated open borders where people are just pouring over, but there was an intentional sending of people from these gangs to the United States. So I think Trump, it's probably going to get brought up in court when this is challenged, et cetera, and goes through the process. But they're going to say, this was not an invasion. We're not at war with Venezuela, Colombia, the Tren de Agua. But I think that the Trump administration framing this was an intentional invasion by a terrorist organization that purposefully sent people who were sent out of the prisons in Venezuela, Colombia to the United States, knowing the borders were open and that they could set up shop in the world's most powerful, richest country. That I think that he has a good case to make there. And it began with them reclassifying the gang as a terrorist organization. So again, they did, I liked the way that the AP was reporting this, like under cover of darkness, there was a leak and the Trump administration scrambled the planes and tried to get them over international waters before. I'm like, yeah, because they knew what was going to come down the pike. And at least they got 200 and something of them out because...
Well, I mean, this is going to get mitigated fast. I mean, this is going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court if it has to, and Trump will win, by the way. But it's interesting that Democrats are like, some on the left are like, we should impeach the president of the United States over this. And I'm just thinking to myself, do you guys really want to make this your rallying cry for the midterm elections? Go for it. I mean, I think that'd be delicious. I mean, you want to talk about Donald Trump being on the right side of an 80-20 issue. Like, really? You want us to take these? You would have had us have these thugs, criminals, and rapists fly back to the United States. Really? That's what you're going for on this one?
Yeah.
I just, you're not going to get a lot of Americans riled up to impeach a president of the United States over this one.
No,
right.
I mean,
in fact, they support it.
Scott Jennings quickly, prepare for the next 80-20 issue. Dems passionately arguing for the return of Venezuelan gang members despite Trump. I mean, I was trying to actually find like the best case steel man of the other side. Like, why would anyone in America want people even closely affiliated? Well, first off, all the people that are deported were illegal immigrants, right? That's just the baseline.
Right.
This is like, okay, are they gang affiliated on top of that? And with Tren de Aragua, there's a lot of tattoos that are very brazenly, it reminds me a lot of the El Salvador situation when Nayib Bukele basically was like, our country is functionally run by the most violent, evil, aggressive gang members ever created. It's like someone created these people in a lab. They have tattoos on their face saying in order to get into the gang, you have to rape, murder a random person for fun, basically, to prove your worth. And so what he did was he rounded all these people up.
And 23 of these were from the gang MS-13 from El Salvador. So this was both. This was the worst of the worst.
So let me just put this out here first. The liberal critique is this, from what I've seen. So to try my best to understand the other argument here is it's important for you to understand this. The people in this photo were residents of the United States that were denied due process. They were rounded up and shipped to a prison in El Salvador without trial, without evidence, simply on suspicion of gang affiliation. This was done in defiance of American courts that deemed the action illegal. They could be legal residents. They could be innocent bystanders. They could be asylum seekers. For all we know, they could be U.S. citizens. Now they're trapped in one of the most violent prisons on earth, enduring brutality beyond what most of us can imagine. If you don't find this morally repulsive, then you are morally repulsive.
Okay, so that again,
Thoughts?
The assumption here is that because it didn't go through a court process, that there was no evidence. But who's to say that there was no evidence? Like, you're telling me that INS had no information on these guys? Like, they couldn't possibly ID this guy?
They just rounded up random guys, right?
The difference is
that's the implication.
That because of this Alien Act, they didn't actually have to go to a court and say, hey, by the way, we're doing this, and there's no due process. They just literally removed them because it would be like if Osama bin Laden had somehow wound up in Texas. We wouldn't actually have to go to a court and say, by the way, we're expelling him. Of course, in his case, we would have had him executed. But that's my point. Like, a terrorist you don't have to be like, oh, well, let me just make sure, go before court and say, no, it's like he's a terrorist. He's an enemy combatant. We don't have to do this. That's the point the Trump administration is making. And the left is making a process argument. The left, and by the way, process arguments don't really work that well with American people. Trust me, I know. I've been on the losing side of these a lot. That's where
welcome to our world, left.
That's where it's like, well, the process upon which this is doing, I don't like it. And Americans are very practical, and it's not always a good thing, but in general, they kind of lean back on the common sense and they go, okay, wait, what are we arguing about? Oh, you're saying that this plane full of rapists, thugs, and murderers is being sent back, to Latin America, but you didn't like that it didn't go before a judge first? Oh, okay. I really don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say I think that's the real point. If you're just talking about how in general Americans are viewing this, they just cut through the process, cut through everything. What is actually happening here? It's basically an unwinnable issue for the other side. But I think as we've kind of followed things closely, I mean, the irony is pretty rich here, is it not? That Democrats now are all of a sudden concerned about a constitutional crisis after the country was literally invaded and sanctuary cities openly defied federal law about whether or not you can have people here. So I'm not sympathetic to these arguments at all.
I get the second half of this, though. What I'm trying to get at, I guess, would be that the left has dominated the judiciary for generations. Now we finally got to the point where after many years, after many successful elections, we finally get a 6-3 court through a lot of hard work and some luck, and even that 6-3 court is mostly just 5-4 sometimes. But the point is we're like clawing our way back to some sort of sanity in the judiciary. But for the most part, the left has been able to use the judiciary for decades and generations to unwind and thwart conservative policy left and right. Like we finally get our way to doing something, and then like they get a freeze on it. Oh, we got to stop it. And then by the time we finally win the court case, like our president might even be already out of office. It's infuriating. So with the court finally at a 6-3 balance, which mean, like I said, it's really kind of like 5-4 or 4.5 sometimes. We have this ability, hopefully, to try to actually get things moving along. We've had these kind of squabbles before. This is not new.
No, but then the other point I wanted to make on this, based on like the view of the American people on the Trump administration currently, this being one of the things. But I mean, at this point, an NBC poll came out. Trump tied for highest approval he's ever had, as more Americans say the U.S. is on the right track than any time in 20 years. Now, I don't think this is unrelated to what the left is calling a, quote, constitutional crisis. Actually, I feel like in a lot of ways, the left celebrated that for a long time while they were in power, as Josh said, as you have a leader that basically runs on campaign promises, does whatever it takes to get it done, and isn't afraid of the, oh my gosh, I'm going to be viewed as unconstitutional. I'm going to be viewed as, not going with the popular whatever. He's actually moving through kind of the nonsense here and getting things done for the people that he said he would get it done for. So this is kind of unsurprising to me, where I think the left is really trying to make us feel like scared or something like that. But the status quo has been my country being invaded for the last 4 years, and then trying to make it pretend like it wasn't being invaded.
Right. And like you said, it's the next 80-20 issue after the women and men's sports. And I think that, the line that people keep giving on the social media and even at perhaps my St. Patrick's party last night is, well, did you vote for this? Did you vote for, the no due process for these men who were like shipped off to this horrible? And I'm like, yeah, I did vote for this.